Right, let's try again. Let me see if there's any volume on this part. I do not know what happened first time. I tried a second time, there was absolutely nothing. So let's try again. Try again. Yes, so I've got sound on my iPad for this, so my apologies for that. Marjorie, I hope you're there, and I'm not sure at what point the sound disappeared, but I will have a look later and see if I can sort it out. Right, where were we? Okay, so I was about to start, I think. Yeah, I think I was just clearing stuff away. Let me move this cable out of the way and move everything back down to my hands, and then hopefully that's not what caused the problem last time. It doesn't usually. I've no idea what the issue was, but thank you for alerting me to it. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works, but it so often does not. Okay, so let me just check if I've got volume still. Yes, I still have. Okay, so if you're just joining me, this is part 2 of part 1 of stenciling and masking, because we had some technical glitch after I've been going for about 20 minutes and the only thing I could do was stop and restart. So I'm hoping that everything will now be fine. Let me just tape that cord up out of the way. I keep trying to find a slightly more high-tech way of dealing with this trailing cable, but I've so far failed. I don't want it to be in your way, but I do need to have enough slack to actually move. Right, okay, so I talked in the last part a little bit about the difference between a mask and a stencil, and I showed you the 3 sets of stencils that I have, and I am going to call them stencils because I primarily consider them to be stencils, not masks, but Stampin' Up do call them masks. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about keeping everything in place and what you can use with them and cleaning them. So basically you're going to use these. The areas you can see on these stencils which are black will not be coloured in when you've finished. The areas you can see that are white will take on whatever colour you put through the stencil. You can use ink, you can use colour sprays, you can use markers, you can use ink on daubers, you can use watercolour pencils, you can use chalk pastels, you can use heat embossing, you can use gold leafing, you can use embossing paste. So there are so many different things you can use with these stencils. When you've finished using them, if you've used a water-based product like an ink or something like a chalk pastel that's just going to come off very, very easily, then you can rinse them under the tap. That's what I tend to do. Or if I'm wanting to use the same stencil again but with different colours, I tend to use something like a baby wipe and give it a quick wipe off. If I'm using something like embossing paste, which will dry very quickly, and once it's dry it's almost impossible to get off, I have a bowl of warm water with a little bit of washing up liquid in it next to me, and the minute I have taken it off my work I drop it into that bowl, and that keeps any residue of embossing paste on there moist until I can actually do some clean up at the end of my session. It drives me mad to have to get up and clean a stencil under the tap the minute I've used it and then come back and do it the same again with another one. So that's the way I do it, and I use a toothbrush, an old one I hasten to add, to scrub any residue off these. I also do something similar with warm water and washing up liquid if I've used Versamark on them, because that's sticky and it comes off very easily under the tap. Then I just let them air dry and then store them away again. So that's just a little bit about cleaning them. Something I am going to try today, which is a tip I've only just learned, which is to spray them with rubbing alcohol and wipe it off with a bit of kitchen paper or whatever. And because the rubbing alcohol dries really quickly, almost instantly, you can get straight on with using it again. When I use a baby wipe, not only do I find that it can leave little fibres behind, but also it sometimes takes a little while to dry. So we'll try that today and see if it works. In terms of tape, you will want probably to fix your stencil down to your card and maybe to your work surface. I have tried all kinds of things, including this really good painter's tape. I've tried pretty much every low tack tape I can find. I've tried dabbing them on my clothes and then putting them on my projects, and I still find that sometimes they will pull the pull the paper off when I'm peeling them off my card, and that's always really annoying. So what I've started to use are these, and these are little pieces of our masking paper. So the masking paper is in the catalogue. It comes in these sheets, and you can use it to create masks when you're stamping if you want to give a sense of perspective and have images one behind another. But I often end up with little bits and pieces of scraps, and I do keep them all in here. Got a little piece like that, for instance. And I have cut some of them up to use with my stencils. And I find that you can use them several times over. And when I'm working, I tend to just keep them stuck on a box or something. Some of these are quite well used, as you can see. I have got a couple of bits of painter's tape there, but actually I much prefer the masking paper. So I'm going to show you some very basic stenciling first of all. Let's find a piece of card. So this is just our basic white card, but you can work onto any of our coloured card, or the white or the vanilla. So let's just stick that down. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you something else first. So my stencil is bigger than my card. If I stick that down like that, I'm going to have that little piece there which the ink isn't going to touch. So instead, if I stick it to the back of my stencil, I'm just trying to make sure I get it straight, like that, then it won't move underneath the stencil, but I haven't actually got anything stuck on the front. So that's my first top tip for you. So I've got my blending brush here. This is my favourite for using with stencils, but you can use a piece of sponge, you can use a sponge dauber, you can use anything else that you like to use to apply ink. And I really do like the mini ones for this, but the big ones work perfectly well too. So I've just got some ink on my brush. I'm just going to dab it on there to get the worst of the kind of the blobbiness off. Start moving my hand and then come down and make contact, and the ink will go through the go through the holes, yeah, via the bristles, go through onto my card underneath. So let me detach that and just show you. And you can see that the more ink you apply in one area, the darker it is, the less you apply, the paler it is. So you can get different effects just with one colour of ink. So let's turn that over. So that shows you the very basics, and you can see that that masking paper is not taking off the surface of that at all, which of these is the inky side, the other one. So I'm now going to work on the other side of this piece of card, just because these are just little samples that I'm showing you. I will have a few finished projects in session 2, but this one is really just all about the basic techniques. And let me just work on a scrap of grid paper so the one underneath doesn't get too dirty. Now when I'm making a card front, what I actually prefer to do is to not cover the whole area generally, but in fact to just work on a small area in quite a random sort of way. So if I now take that card off, I've got something which is much less even. I haven't stenciled the whole of the card, and for me that is far more pleasing. But you might prefer to just evenly stencil the whole of your card, and that's absolutely fine. We are all different in what we like. So you can also introduce different colours with the same stencil. So I think this is my clean side. Let me just stick this down again. And I'm still using these same little bits of masking paper. So I've gone about halfway down. I'm going to change colour now. So this was Azure Afternoon. Now I'm going to bring in Berry Burst. I like these colours together, but I've also picked them because they show up really well on camera. So I'm now going to start at the bottom and work up towards the middle. So I start at the top and work down. I'm going to overlap that blue a little bit. And again, I'm not trying to cover the whole of the card, I'm just doing it in a partial way. And now you can create a really pretty ombre effect. Let me turn it sideways. Try and get that all underneath. There we are. And obviously you could start with one colour here and then just fade it and fade it and fade it out, but I really like that two colours mixing in the middle effect. Okay, I just dropped one of my pieces of tape on the floor, never mind. Right, let's try cleaning this up with some rubbing alcohol. So this is just isopropyl alcohol I've put in one of our stamping spritzers. I have got the windows open. You wouldn't want to be doing this in an unventilated room because you can kind of smell it a bit. But there we go, that looks okay to me. All right. So now let's look at actually cutting an aperture, and this is where I'm going to give you a sneak peek as well. So I've just got a piece of card here. Because I can't get my cutting machine under the camera very easily, I've pre-cut this, but I've just cut a circle out, and you may realise that this is not something you've seen before. So this is one of the new dies. These are in the new mini catalogue. This is a set of deckled circles dies, and I went wow when I opened these just now, because look how many there are and look how big they go. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 dies in here. If I put my hand on top, you can see how huge they are. They are absolutely enormous. Does it say how big that largest one measures? 6 3/4 inches. I think it says 6 3/4 by 6 1/2. Well, that doesn't make sense if it's a circle, does it? But perhaps that's because of the decaling. So let's put it on here. Did I say 6? I did say 6. I think that should be 5. Yeah, it's almost 6 inches. This will make a great card base. That's something I will be playing with. But anyway, these are lovely. They're just a little bit more interesting than ordinary circles. But what an amazing set. I'm really looking forward to using those. So I used one of those to cut a circle out here. And I now have a stencil and a mask. So let's use the mask first of all. And in the same way as I'm going to use this, I could also use these which I showed you in the first bit of the video before the sound disappeared. So this is effectively exactly the same thing. So you've got a ticket shape and a label shape, stencils and masks. But let's use this one that I made. So first of all, I'm going to attach it to my card underneath, and I'm just going to use a little bit of this masking paper and I'm going to fold it back on itself. So I've got something that's sticky both sides. Let's stick that to the back. Stick that on there, and then let's add a stencil over the top. Let's use this one. So again, I need to attach this to the back so that it doesn't move, and I don't want to stick it down to my surface because otherwise I will have a part of my card that has no ink on it. I'm just trying to get this centered. There we go. I think that'll do. Okay, let's put this just on a little bit of scrap again. Ooh, that's moved. These are so non too sticky that they haven't. Actually, it's not. It's because the stencil design here is very, very fine, so there's very little to stick it to. Let me instead, let me stick these the other way around so that they go all the way to the edge. My stencil straight, get my card straight. If I put these like that, then they're actually making contact with the edge of my stencil. There's just not enough contact with this really lacy design. There we go. All right. So let's use Berry Burst again, because that's what I've got here. And this time I am actually going to go all over. And what will happen is that that circular mask in the center will mask off that part of my piece of card, and there will be no stenciling on that area. The stencil is actually a little bit tacky to the touch because I didn't clean it quickly enough after I used embossing paste on it. So the embossing paste is a little bit tacky, so is my stencil. So as I move my fingers, it's actually sticking to them. So there we go, that's a lesson in point. Make sure you clean your stencils immediately when you've used embossing paste. Okay. So let's move that. So first of all, we've got a lovely stencil background. I do really like this one. And then if we take off this mask, we've then got a space in the middle. So you can stamp a design on there, you can stamp words on there. And I have got a couple of little other sample pieces where I have stamped them. So these are just to make the point. They're not, I haven't particularly chosen gorgeous colours or anything like that. There's one, so I've just stamped an image in there. And another one here where I've stamped words in the middle. I particularly like it for words, and it makes for what looks like quite a dimensional card, but actually this is of course totally flat. All right, so what about this other piece that we had? Let's use that. Now this time I can stick my card to my work surface. Because this is going to go over the top. And let's stick that down too. So this piece of vanilla card is going to mask the card underneath around here, but the aperture section is exposed. So is down the bottom, because I've only got a small mask, but I'm actually just not going to ink that part down there. Let's pick a different pattern. What else have I got here? What might be nice? Let's do this one. Now I could stick that down as well onto my surface, but to be honest, I'm only stenciling a very small section, so I'm not going to bother about that. So I'm just going to hold it firmly in place and then come in and stencil that aperture section. And it's a good, I mean, I always work in a circle anyway with the blending brushes. My natural motion is to go that way, which is, what's that, anti-clockwise, but work the other way as well, because that just makes sure you don't miss any little areas of the stencil. So now I lift that off, and then I remove my mask, and then I just have a shape in the center with the stenciling on it. And excuse me, I've just put a pink thumbprint there. And that again you can use as a focal point on a card, like this little sample piece here. So it just adds some interest when you stamp over the top of it, and obviously you would then build that up into a card. Okay, so I'm going to put my inks away for a minute and bring out my pastels, which are here somewhere because I got them out, but I can't immediately see them. There they are. So there is a slightly different colour selection in the catalogue now, but they work in exactly the same way. I like to apply these for a stencil with a blending brush, and that's what I will be doing today. You can use your fingers, although if you've got a very detailed stencil, there doesn't seem to be as much space, if you like, for you to push the colour through with your fingers as there is with a blending brush. You could use a sponge dauber, and you might have some other tools in your kit that you like to use with chalk pastels. So I'm just using the opposite side of this piece of card. Let's just lay this down. So I'll use this grid pattern this time. Try and get it straight. And again, I'll stick and go out to the edge, because the grid is quite fine on the stencil. It doesn't provide very much to actually stick the tape to. There we are. So you can take your pastel and scribble on there and then blend it out. I prefer to put it onto a piece of scrap card. So I just scribble my pastel on there. It creates quite a lot of dust. You can also take, where's my craft knife? You can take a craft knife and scrape it like that, if you'd rather do that and not scribble. But either way, you just want some of that soft pastel which has been pressed together with a binder to make the little sticks. So I've just picked some up on my blending brush, and I'm now just going across just as if it was ink. Now you will get a much more subtle effect with these chalk pastels than you will with ink. You can build it up and keep going and over and over and over. You can also blend the colours on here, but generally it's still going to be more subtle. I don't tend to fix my pastels when I use them, but you can do. You can use a spray fixative. You can use cheap hairspray, as long as it's not something that you're expecting to be kept forever and ever and ever. If it is, you're better using a proper artist quality fixative. But unless I've applied a really thick layer of them, they don't move very much. And certainly something like this, I'm working them well into the surface, so there's not much transfer of the pastel at all. So I'm using quite a lot of pressure here. I'm pressing those pastel, the pastel powder into the card as I work. Let's just add one little bit more. There we are. Let's get rid of that. And again, peel off the masking paper. I've just torn the masking paper. I'm trying to keep it so I can use that piece again. There we are. And there is my stenciled piece. I think it gives a really pretty effect. It's very delicate. Okay, I'm getting a big pile of stencils here to clean. I must remember which ones I've used and which ones I haven't. And actually that one I do want to use again. I've got pastel dust over everything. Let's just have a little quick swipe round, try and clean up a little bit. And I'm just going to clean that stencil off. If you haven't got isopropyl alcohol in your craft room, it's actually a really useful thing. I use it to mix with paints and the enamel effects to make sprays, and ink as well to make a spray ink. Sometimes I add some water as well as some alcohol, but what the alcohol basically does is it evaporates so much quicker than water, and it can help stop whatever you're spraying from warping either at all or warping as much. You can't just walk in and buy it. At least I've never found anywhere I can just walk in and buy it in this country. I know you can in all sorts of other countries. However, it's very easy to find on Amazon or eBay. So isopropyl alcohol, and I buy the 70% one, which is 70% alcohol. Let me just write that down in case you haven't come across it. It's not very expensive, and you can get it in everything from tiny bottles to huge containers. So that's the isopropyl alcohol. So I was just going to show you quickly how to get a tartan effect or a gingham effect with these masks. So these masks again are in the artistic mix pack. Okay, I've got a few minutes left because we had to stop in the middle and restart, didn't we? So once again, I'm just going to fix my card to the back of my stencil, try and get it as centrally as I can. So this is one with the large grid pattern. So I'm just going to very quickly come over that with my blue ink. So this is Asia Afternoon. I want this to be quite pale. I haven't added any more to the brush, so I'm really just cleaning the brush on it. And you can see how quickly I can apply the ink using a blending brush. This is one of the small ones. I could actually use a big one very easily on here, and it would even be quicker again. But they are lovely just to swoosh colour on. Okay, so I'll take that one off and add it to my pile of stencils to be cleaned. There we go. So you can see that's given us a large grid pattern, and then what I want to do is to add this stencil, which is in the same pack, the Artistic Mix, over the top, and I'm going to line up the lines both ways with the lines both ways on this, so bear with me just while I get that straight. And if you've got the top of my head in your view shot, I apologise. Is that it? Dog's barking like crazy. I think the neighbours have had the audacity to go in the garden. Their garden. But the dog's not keen. Okay, I think we're there. So let me press the tape on that side and then try and pick it up without moving it on this side. Stick that side down. This is the bit that takes the longest, to be quite honest. There we are. Yeah, I think that's straight. So this time I'm coming in with the Berry Burst, and again I haven't re-inked this, I may need to. But whether you call it tartan or whether you call it fancy gingham, it's a really popular look on projects. Yeah, I need some more ink. My ink pad is completely buried. You can't see my desk, it's just as well. So where I'm working over blue ink, I'm getting a slightly purpler effect. I've also got a blob on there. So if I make this into a card base, luckily it's somewhere where I will be putting something across there anyway. It's because I rushed re-inking my brush. I should have taken a moment longer and made sure that the ink was properly blended into the bristles. Oh, that's my excuse anyway. There we go. So now let me lift that off, pull off the tape, and we've obviously got a purplish pink now because the blue and the pink have mixed. Every other stripe across there is white, and actually I was probably a little bit too subtle with the blue, but every other stripe is blue. So we've effectively got three colours on there now. We've got the pinky purple, we've got the blue, and we've got the white, which is our base card. And you can see that you can play around with colours quite a lot with these. You know, you could do red and green Christmas, you could do browns and greys, you know, greens and blues, all those would work and be really, really nice to have a look at. So that's that one. And then finally, I've got my eye on the clock. The last thing I'm going to show you today is working with a fine marker, because you don't have to actually blend ink through these. You can use a marker. Let me find, which one shall I use? This one might work. Let's do this. Now, I don't have any of the new version of the Stampin Write markers. These are the water-based markers. I've got the old ones, which have got a very fine tip on them. The new ones, the fine tip will still work. Or you might have other markers in your collection. I mean, this is a fine liner with a very, very fine tip. You can also do this with watercolour pencils. I've done that, and then I've used a blender pen and blended the colour out. So there are lots of things that you can do with these, but I think fine liners are the easiest. and I'm just going to hold this in place because I'm just going to do a little bit to show you. So I'm literally just going to draw around the shape of the stencils here. Put the lid on that one-handed. So that's a Night of Navy one. This is a Melon Mambo one. So I'm now going to do some different areas in pink. Again, I've picked colours that I hope will show up easily for you. And because these are water-based, again, the ink will just rinse off the stencil with no trouble. And you can go around every single area on the stencil, or you can miss areas. Depends on the kind of look you like and how much patience you have. Let me just do a little bit more before I lift this up and show you. It does make you actually really look at the pattern on the stencil, perhaps more carefully than you do when you are just going over it very quickly with an ink blending brush. So I'm not going to do all the areas. I'm missing out some of the strips, but I am going to do these little sets of 4 squares. When my children were younger, they actually used to love having some felt pens and some stencils and doing this kind of thing. It would keep them quiet for quite a long time. Ooh, I'm rushing now. That wasn't a very good one. Okay. So there you are. So you can create quite a graphic look by drawing through your stencils. And obviously these pieces you can die cut, you can punch them, you can emboss on top of them. There are endless things that you can do with stenciled pieces. So that has come to the end of today's session, which is very much stenciling basics. Let me find some of the pieces I did and just summarize everything. I really hope that there was sound at the beginning when I was talking through kind of tape and washing your stencils and that sort of thing, but I won't know till I go back and listen to it. So you can use pretty much any media with your stencils. Remember to clean them as soon as you've finished if you're using anything that dries and doesn't then wash off. If you're using water-based ink, the Stampin Write markers, the ink pads, the chalk pastels will also wash off even if they've been on there some time, so that's not quite so urgent. So basic stenciling, you can stencil something all over, or you can just do some areas of it and leave some areas with no stenciling, and you can add more or less ink to give you a different look. If you cut a shape out of a piece of card, then you end up with 2 pieces. One is your piece with the aperture, and one is the piece that came out of the aperture, and you can use both of them. If you put the piece that came out down, you can then stencil over the top of it and get something like this, where you can then add a stamped image or a cut out image in that masked area there. Or if you use this piece, and I'm trying to find the sample that I did with it on. There it is. Then you lay it down and you add your stencil on top, and then stencil through, and you will end up with a shaped area which you can again then embellish as you like. You can use chalk pastels on these, which is what I did here. This gives you a really soft and delicate effect. You can create checks and tartans if you have the artistic masks, is that what they're called? Artistic mix, because you've got two there that you can layer. And then finally you can create a very graphic image with markers. So what have I done with that piece? That was here just now, there we are. Using as many colours as you like. And this one I've just turned over as well. You can also, this is your basic stenciling with a brush and inks. You can create an ombre effect as well, either with two colours that blend in the centre or with one colour that just fades and fades and fades out as it gets to the other end. So I'm going to very quickly turn this back up the right way and say goodbye to you. Don't forget to find your bonus days coupons, because you definitely want to be able to use those this month. And watch out for your new catalogue, either at a class with me or it will arrive in the post towards the end of the month. I'm trapped. I've got my microphone lead so well attached that I can't undo it. So I think we're just going to have to live with me very, very close. Oh, there we go. That like joining me. Bye bye.